Well, so, I mean, it was disappointing, but not unexpected, as you say. I think that we have to focus on the fact that um, local election results are not reflected in national election results. To give you an example of Stoke-on-Trent, and this is an analysis done by the local editor of the local paper, of the 2019 all-out elections, we only lost 2 Conservative councillors. There were 11 losses from what were the city independents. So there's been a shift from the city independents to Labour, but actually they performed less well than they did when Ed Miliband was Prime Minister. And if you see just how much effort they put into Stoke, I think that there would be no reason for them to be triumphalist at all.
Okay, but it is. I mean, Jo. I mean that is that's a doubted defence. But when you look at the raw numbers, I mean, most psephologists agree that it looks like it might be time's up for the Tory Party, because there's such an anti-Tory coalition, people who are voting for other parties other than the Conservative Party. What do you think Rishi Sunak should do? I mean, you're standing down at the next election, but what do you think he can turn it round?
Well, I think, I mean, as you know, we've got 5 very clear policies to halve inflation, to grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists, and stop the votes. And he's already making good progress on that. I mean, he's only had 6 months, forgive me. And yes, I think absolutely, but we have to evidence that we can deliver that. I mean, we are in a very difficult time with the cost of living crisis and energy costs and everything, which are nothing to do with this government's performance. I mean, if you look at other European countries, they have exactly the same problems. So we have to work to improve conditions within the economy, and that is exactly what the voters want. And I think they will trust us again if we can do that.
Do you think Rishi should go?
Absolutely not. No, he's only just getting started.
But this is his first test at the ballot box, and it hasn't gone very well for him.
Well, no, this wasn't a test. This wasn't a test for Rishi. Actually, if you look at personal, who the voters like, Rishi Sunak comes out ahead of Keir Starmer as the Prime Minister that people like. It's the party that actually needs to deliver for the country. And as I say, we've been through an enormously difficult time. Any government would have had exactly the same challenges. We are just the party in government at the moment. And, I don't hear either of the other main parties providing any solutions that are deliverable. And so, I think absolutely we need to convince people that we are going to make, the cost of living, make things affordable.
Okay.
But there are no other messages coming out of the other parties that will suggest that a change of party, a change of vote will deliver any economic benefits.
Okay, thanks for that, Jo. We'll probably come back to you in a few points. Nia, now, I mean, a good night for Labour on many accounts, as I went through in my introduction. But some a lot of commentary from many of the psephologists saying Labour's not yet on track for a majority. What do you think about that?
I think this is a very, very important step for us, because what it shows is that people in all parts of the country, so very different types of constituency, very different areas, are saying, yes, we would be prepared to give Labour a go. And they can see that we have that sort of widespread support, that we represent people in all parts of England, Wales and Scotland. And we have that opportunity to offer them a real alternative. There's no doubt about it that they really have lost faith in the Conservatives' ability to run the economy. I think the mini budget last autumn has left many people with enormous mortgage bills or higher rent, or businesses with higher loans to pay back, and all of that gets fed through into prices. Apart from the fact, as we know, that it's taken a lot of pushing to get them to have a windfall tax on the gas companies to help people with the cost of living. So I think that people are turning to us. They are fed up, and I do think the spread of seats gives us that real opportunity for a general election.
I mean, And definitely, there's no doubt that Labour did do very well in terms of winning more councils and winning more councillors as well. And many people still feel that, you know, the country may well be falling out of love with the Conservative Party, but they're not madly in love with Keir Starmer. I mean, they definitely might be flirting with the Labour Party, flirting quite heavily, but I don't know if they've fallen madly head over heels in love with the Labour Party either. And one of the criticisms that we hear a lot from our listeners is that we know about what Labour, you know, their attack lines on the Conservative Party. We know the attack lines on the previous leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, but we don't yet have a really clear sense of what Keir Starmer actually stands for. We know that he wants to scrap things, like he scrapped a lot of his leadership pledges, but we don't really know what his big vision is for the country, for a positive win. What do you think he needs to do to make more of a positive case for Labour rather than just constantly attacking the Tories, which I do concede, and I know this in my previous life, is a really important part of the opposition. But where's the positive vision?
Well, I think it's definitely there. And I think the point is that it will take a while for the messaging to get through. So we have started on the 5 missions, very, very far reaching. Growth in the economy, incredibly important. The green economy, very, very important for us to get ahead of the game. We've seen what the Americans are doing in terms of attracting companies to invest in the new green technologies there. Europe's responding, and what's happening here? We're not there. We're not getting ahead of the game. So we're very clear that we want the focus on growth. We want the focus on the green economy. Obviously, we know that there are going to be further announcements now about the NHS and education and skills, and the preparedness to look very radically at how we deal with them. We've already said, look, staffing in the NHS is so critical that we need to double the number of medical students. So those things are there, and in the run up to the next general election, there will be more of an opportunity for us to talk about those. But it's always difficult to get a big chunk of airtime as the opposition.
Oh, well, Nia, I think people are actually really keen to hear from the Labour Party now. And look, before I move on to my next guest, I just want to put this final point. We'll do a bit more to and fro. I mean, you and I work together in the Labour Party. We know that history in British politics does not dictate that the Labour Party often wins general elections or often delivers a Labour Prime Minister. And there have been occasions where there's been a lot of optimism about the Labour Party. I remember when I was working for Ed Miliband, and you were and I were kind of colleagues. Ed Miliband did really, really well in local elections in 2013. In the run-up to the 2015 general election, we all remember the polls looked really, really good for the Labour Party, and yet there was a surprise Tory majority. How nervous do you still feel that even though the polls are good for the Labour Party now, things could fall apart at the last minute?
Well, that's why I say this is a really important step forward, but it is a step on the journey. First of all, we've got incoming councillors often coming into quite difficult council situations now, and they're going to be under the spotlight. Clearly, there are areas which didn't have elections this time. There's an awful lot of work, I think, to do on the ground to make sure that people do feel confident and they do have more knowledge about what we're about, and that they do have that real will to back us. And so we don't for 1 minute take these as a complacent signal to ourselves. We see it as very much part of an ongoing effort.
I think that's a fair question. I mean, we did have an excellent night, and we didn't just have an excellent night in those blue wall seats with Conservative MPs where we really feel that we can challenge effectively. We had an excellent night, perhaps in places where we wouldn't have expected to as well. So a really, really strong progress for us. Can we convert them into parliamentary seats? Well, we don't take those results for granted, and we are going to work extremely hard to try and achieve that over the next year or so. But I think we can do. I mean, I think Daisy Cooper is the shining example of somewhere where we built up that local election base and then got an MP elected. And even if you look at my by-election win, we convinced people that we were the challengers in North Shropshire because we actually had a really good vote share in the 2021 local elections, even though actually we came very close in a number of districts, including mine, but we didn't actually elect any councillors. So, I think building up that activist base, being active on the ground, and, you know, letting people know that we're fighting for their area really does give us credibility when it comes to fighting for those parliamentary seats.
And it is going to be really interesting to see how the Liberal Democrats do when you come to those elections, because, I mean, the Labour Party will be pushing the line that people, you know, should still vote Labour because, you know, they want a majority, but, you know, you may well be able to convert those. And of course, now the prospect of some kind of hung parliament is much more into play. Now, I know the answer that I'm going to get, which is nobody's talking about any deals now, and that's not what you're focused on. And we'll just assume that's the answer you're going to say, because that's certainly when I was working politics, that's the answer that would be given. But just another way of looking at it, I've heard a lot of people say that actually the Liberal Democrats might not want to do a coalition if that was the situation, because the last one went quite badly for the Liberal Democrats. Is that something that your activists and your movement talk about a lot, Helen?
I think the truth is we don't know what that day is going to look like after the general election, and so I know it's a bit of a cliche now, but we can't focus on what might happen if we win a lot of MPs, because we need to work really hard to convince those people that have put their trust in us this time around in the local elections to convert those into parliamentary votes. So it does sound like a cliche, but the honest truth is we aren't all sitting there plotting out what that route is after the day. We're sitting out there plotting out what the route is to make sure we get a good number of MPs in the next election.
And even though, again, you know, we can't, again, it is a hypothetical in the future, although the reality is behind the scenes, as one gets closer to an election, strategists do start thinking about this, because you have to. But in terms of your movement, how strong is there still a desire for things like changing the voting system? When you look at the sort of priorities, the Liberal Democrat priorities, because on a lot of policy issues, you and Labour are quite aligned, things like the windfall tax and you know, better investment in public services. There's quite a lot of synergy between you and the Labour Party on issues. But the big thing which is different is proportional representation. Keir Starmer has said he absolutely doesn't want to entertain that. Interestingly, across the Labour movement, there's a bit more of an appetite for that. But to your activists and to your members and to your Liberal Democrat movement, how important is voting reform?
Well, I think it's clearly going to be in our next manifesto. I think Ed Davey said that this morning on one of the major programmes this morning. It's an important issue for us. We think the voting system is unfair. We think that a system where you have to go out and vote for the person that you dislike the least isn't very inspiring for people. So it's important to us. You know, if you're asking me, would that be a red line in a negotiation? I don't know the answer to that, because, as I said, we are focusing on getting the MPs elected that we need to be an important party in Westminster, and a more important party than we are at the moment. Yeah. And I think we are leading on some issues. You mentioned the windfall tax. We led on that. That was our idea in October 21. Okay. So we feel like we've got lots of ideas. We've got lots of important principles around voter reform, but we really just, you know, we're not laying out our red lines now for some kind of discussion that we don't know if it's going to happen.